Are you satisfied with your understanding of sustainability? If you are not, imagine a journey together, a pluralistic one, with academia, innovators, startups, NGOs, all looking for solutions to the greatest challenge of our time. My name is Samuele Tini, and this is the Sustainability Journey. Welcome to a new episode, and today we are going to tackle emerging market, and we are going to discuss China with somebody who has been there for more than decades, working with change makers and business leaders. So he's actually the program director for China for the conference board, and he is also the founder of the sustainability director. So I want to welcome today Lorne Michaels. Lorne, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
And there is a lot of discussion, especially in the media, about China, sustainability, how we can do it. And of course, as in our tradition, we want to know from people on the ground, people they have experience, not just reading reports or listening to politicians. But before that, I want to ask you in a few minutes, can you share with our listener, which is your sustainability journey? Which sparked your passion for this field?
Well, that started quite a long time ago. Ironically, here in Shanghai, I had the pleasure of meeting the founder of Interface Carpets, Ray Anderson. He's since passed away, but he's a legend in sustainability circles. And, you would be hard pressed not to find a case study in sustainability studies in any university that doesn't actually bring Ray Anderson's name into the conversation, because he was a real pioneer back in the early 80s of actually transitioning his organization, which predominantly makes carpets. So a lot of those carpet tiles that you'll see in office buildings are Interface carpets. But he was a real pioneer, and I met him at a presentation years ago. It must have been 2007, maybe about 2007, and he was giving a speech here, and I had a chance to sit down and chat with him, and he just inspired me because he was, he told me that he started that journey so far ahead of everybody else, and everybody was, kind of not discouraging him, but every emphasis on the impracticalities, and it's not necessarily good for business. You don't have to do it, and he said it was that journey that he started, and he said it's just been a learning journey since he started that, and he's still learning. At the time was learning day by day. It's not just about how to make a product more sustainable, but it's also all the intricacies of dealing with people, your value chain, convincing your suppliers, and also your upstream and downstream to work with you to create a truly sustainable business. And no business, I think, on this planet can truly call itself sustainable. He was, and it's a bit like Patagonia. They'll say we're not a sustainable company, even though they're lauded as a truly sustainable company. They say we still have these pain points that we just can't address yet. But I think that's the key word, yet. So when I was talking with Ray, he just got me very inspired, because I'm a guy that likes to learn constantly. If I feel like I've got my hands around something or my head around something, I'm quick to move on to something else. And the sustainability space is just this complex, ever evolving domain. It is huge, and there's always something to learn. And you can learn it, learning is one thing, doing it is quite another. And that's where you start to really get into these challenges. And if you like a challenge, there's no greater challenge than the sustainability space.
And fantastic, because of course it's such a, let's say, a difficult task to quest. So that what also in the academia sometimes are called the wicked problems. And to discuss that, and to do the, you have a long experience in China, and China sometimes is touted like a sustainability, EV, push of renewable. On the other side, oh, is the bigger emitter, is the one that polluting everything. So this dichotomy. And before going that, since you meet a lot of leaders in the industries as your program director for the conference board, before discuss maybe China, for our, also again, listeners who are not familiar, what is the conference board? And can you tell about quickly the story?
Yeah, so the conference board is a member-driven think tank. It's been around for well, since 1916, and about 75%, roughly around 75% of the Fortune 500 companies are members of the conference board. The conference board, its mandate is to, help generate insights for what lies ahead. So it's not, at being member driven, it's run by the members, and the members will want to address all sorts of challenges they're facing, not just in sustainability. So the conference board has a number of quite famous publications. The Confidence Index is one that you'll see quoted quite a lot on Bloomberg and whatnot. But if you can think about the conference board is really broken down into what we call centers. So you'll have a huge presence in the US and Europe, and these centers will be formed or are formed around like economy, sustainability, human capital, et cetera. So the members will join as an organization, and that gives them access to not just research, but also briefings, working with other members. It gives you a space to really and what's happening in terms of it's not a networking club. Of course the network is crucial, but it gives you an opportunity to engage with like-minded professionals. So you have the CEOs, we'll meet with other CEOs to really look at some of the challenges and what's coming down the road. Where are the trends? The recent backlashes against, for example, things like DEI, et cetera. How does that impact their organization? So the conference board produces wonderful research and publications, for global consumption, some of which is member only access and also for public consumption. And then you have councils, and councils are formed around a very specific domain. So for example, here in China, we'll have the China CEO Council, we'll have the China CFO Council, strategic communications, government affairs. I run the China Sustainability Leaders Council. And of course, we also have our Asia counterparts, so the Asia CFO Council, et cetera. And these councils are populated by individual members from companies. So, the company itself might be a member of the center, but it's also an individual. So the chief sustainability officer, for example, would find it very, very helpful to join, my council here in China, because we're working with other senior executives. Could be from, heavy emitting industries like steel, but also really cutting edge industries like Alibaba and Tencent. And all of them are, despite being in different industries, are learning from each other. So we operate under the Chatham House rule, which means, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, is kind of a nice way to think of it. So it's a safe space. Politics are, not present. You can open up, you can share best practices, what your organization's doing, challenges and pain points, but also, how it's a space for you to explore, like, how do you actually collaborate across the value chain? So things that are, not necessarily specifically sustainability related, but, if you understand how to build complex collaborations, what insights can I take back to my organization and try with our value chain partners. We look at China policy, what's happening in that space, everything from ESG regulations to the cap and trade system that they have in place. How does it affect my business? What do I need to understand and then report back to headquarters the insights that you have. So it's not prescriptive. It's like, well, what's company A doing for, data transparency on their tier 4 suppliers, that kind of stuff. Like, how do you get that information? How do you engage in the power purchase agreements here in China, which is very, very complex and not necessarily as cut and dry as it would be in other markets. So, how do you navigate that? How does it build? What are some of the constraints that you have? Because these are multi-million-dollar investments that companies are making, and they want to make sure that it's money well spent. What's happening in other markets in Asia for power purchase agreements? Do do we know each other enough to recommend somebody who can help us? Can I be that resource to connect them to the Lantau group or a very specific person that can answer that question. So my role as the director is to not just guide the intellectual direction of the council, but also to craft the agenda items, which take a lot of work. That's probably the biggest chunk of my time is actually that agenda, scoping it, the agenda items, the timings, who's going to share. Do I need to bring in a subject matter expert from outside to really deep dive into something, to offer an insight? For example, I have a big March meeting coming up, and we're going to be talking about the value chain, but also I'm bringing in an expert who's worked in bringing the banking industry together of a specific country, like in Central America, through complex collaborations. And how do you get those? It's like herding cats. How do you bring people together? Might be within the same industry, but even within an organization, how do you bring different functions together to focus on that wicked problem that you mentioned, right? And are the traditional problem-solving approaches and tools that we use for technical problems, can they be used for these wicked problems? And the answer is no, you can't. You have to have a mechanism and protocols to work together and through an iterative process, work towards finding a solution. And you might fail along the way, but that has to be built into that process. And that's what makes it really interesting, because even though it's not something that even necessarily touches sustainability, that those insights from former government minister who can say, this is how we did it in the finance industry, this is what we're doing in the US now for grid optimization. It's those insights that then the members go, huh, I never thought of it that way. And then they go back and have those conversations, and then often will reach out to the expert or want to build on this in a future meeting. So that's it in a nutshell. It's fascinating. I love it. Absolutely love it. It really puts you at the forefront of what senior executives are doing in very, very large companies, because they are often at the cutting edge of some of these, because their challenges are just so much bigger and more multifaceted.
And I really like, I mean, I can say you are like in the trenches of sustainability in China, which is the biggest economy in the world soon, or if not yet, depending on the statistics you're looking. And it's really interesting and fascinating for me to discuss, because you have first-hand experience. It's not reports, it's not just press or politics, but what is the sustainability agenda, and how do you also evaluate discussing with the real leaders on the ground of the movement in the area?
So, you have the corporate space, right? You have the big players. They are often at the cutting edge of how they're addressing. For example, if you're a chemical company, how do you engage 40,000 suppliers globally? How do you get that data that you need to just begin trying to get your hands on managing your scope 3 emissions? This is, obviously technology and huge investments go into building these systems, some of which are proprietary, some of which are industry specific that other players can come in and leverage. But then you have a lot of what is happening just on the ground. There's incredible innovation happening here in China, for very interesting reasons. You might look at the US or Europe, on how waste is handled. Okay, so it's very centralized considered, but here in China, you'll have it very decentralized. But there's an incredible network of on the ground solutions providers. These are people that literally, like I'll give you an example. I live in an old house in a lane, in a nice lane area in old Shanghai, the former French concession area. You have this neighborhood level individuals whose job is, of course, keep the streets, the alleys clean of leaves and stuff, but they're also collecting your packaging. And China uses a huge amount of packaging because most people now just get on their phone and are shopping. Like my wife, for example, if she needs one screw, she can put it in, or she can take a picture of a screw, put that in, and it's within either a day or two tops, you get this little package. There's this constant stream of packaging coming in to people's homes. And on certain times of the year, that volume is astronomical. You have 11/11 is the big one, Singles Day, and you just get you can't even access your door sometimes. The pile is so high. We try not to be like that, but it's massive. But it also produces a massive amount of waste. But you have this incredible network here. He's a call him a security guard, call him a street cleaner. He just keeps that his little area that he's responsible for clean. But he also is packaging, taking cardboard, you actually maybe even going into the garbage because there's a centralized garbage, sorting through that as a sort of a preliminary sorting, taking that valuable waste, plastic, glass. We're supposed to separate it, and we do make it easier. But that's sort of that first step. And then you have somebody coming by on a three-wheel electric bike. And those things, excuse me, can carry up to 700 kilos of cardboard. These are massive piles of stacked, wrapped, packaged, X packaging that then goes to facilities which orbit Shanghai within a day or two tops. This collection, the way it's being collected here, is something that you wouldn't see happening in Europe or North America, Australia, because it's not wouldn't be deemed dignified work. You have rubbish collectors, et cetera, that are mainstay of most economies around the world. But because that is handled by municipal governments, you don't really have that level of recycling that's happening. So at the ground level, you have incredible innovation. You have take back programs now for clothes. You have innovation happening around things like waste cooking oil. China uses a lot of cooking oil. There's you have the UCO collectors, used cooking oil collectors coming around to each restaurant because it's a valuable resource. There's value to that because that gets turned into biofuel, which then can be used domestically, sustainable aircraft fuel, or then traded to Europe for part of the directives in Europe for biofuel production. And of course, it's not 100% traceability is a major issue, still remains, but it's an incredible network that's happening here, and the innovation that's happening at the ground level, at the city level, is mind-boggling. So it's big players, but they're a small part. It's what's really happening at the local level that I find most interesting.
Fantastic. And it's really, that is why the dichotomy sometimes in the debates in the West, we say, oh, that's bigger polluter. But on the other side, we see the biggest solar farm in the world now in the desert, the biggest EV deployment in the planet. So it's really a dual edge sword. So, but I can see from your perspective, might be that is taking the leadership in sustainability in some areas.
It is in many ways. China is a very interesting place because it's full of course, contradictions, like anywhere else in the world, really. But in China, the contradictions are quite pronounced because there's no place on the planet that can scale production of, for example, solar panels, wind farms, etc., like China. EV batteries. You need $1 billion, as someone told me, just to even get your toe into the game of batteries. But because China has been able to build massive production, and they've been doing it for years, and often loss making until it's not loss making, and then it's works out. But China's got huge wind farms, huge solar panel farms, but they also have huge energy needs as well, and they've been building out renewables for quite some time. The Three Gorges Dam, questionable as it is for an ecological perspective and also social, produces a huge amount of clean electricity, more or less, right? But what's interesting is China's also very practical, understanding that you can't go all in on renewables right away because of they have an antiquated grid system which is very, very disjointed, and this is a strategic issue that China is right now trying to address. How do you get wind farms in Inner Mongolia producing huge amounts of renewable energy to users in Shanghai? It's not a straight line as the crow flies. You have to go through different grids and the system, which makes the delivery of challenging in China. Also, the practicalities. So, grid issue, because there's a lot of renewables coming online. Sure isn't there to deal. Energy market, like we talked about, power purchase agreements, needs work. They're working on it fast, but it's not something you can wave a magic wand because a lot of the regional governments want to control this versus central government. It's not quite as monolithic as we in the West might think of China. It's like whatever somebody says, ever does it. It doesn't work that way. It's referred to decentralized authoritarianism, and there's regional rivalries, there's local rivalries, provincial rivalries, and that kind of stuff can slow things down in terms of distribution of renewable energy. But it's massive. But China's practical as well, so they're building out coal plants as well, and they feel absolutely entitled to do it. We've had over the years blackouts, and that's not just blackouts in the city. We haven't had the city tends to be fine. It's factories that get impacted. And when you have to shut down factories because you have grid overload, there's too much demand for cooling or heating, it's production. Factories moving to night shifts and cutting production, very, very disruptive. So they're also very practical. They want security, energy security first and foremost as they transition to a higher percentage. But coal will be a major part of China's energy mix for a very, very long time. There's no escaping it.
Fantastic, Lorne. It's really, as I say, dichotomy, but also, I mean, a lot of good progress is coming on. And they say nothing is black and white, the usual manichae thinking, but it's also gray, and there is a path of transition. And this path, you are also now, I mean, to keep you even more busy, just that if not discussing and leading the program and discussing with leaders in China is not enough, you also started a new venture, a venture that is also a sort of, if I might say, correct me if I'm wrong, like a learning path, something that can help, a repository to help people in the quest of sustainability, which I'm sure your discussion with many industries and companies has inspired. So you have now founded this sustainability director. Can you explain it? As what is it?
Yeah, the sustainability directory was born out of many years of frustration, at least on my part, of trying to actually find information that I need on the internet. Of course, I've been in China a very long time, and you have the issues of the Great Firewall, which blocks you from accessing a lot of you need a VPN, et cetera. But even prior to that, just trying to find information, if I'm doing any research or I want to write on something, I want to understand something, it was super, super difficult to find. I would spend hundreds of hours of just searching for something that could answer my question that I had. And then, things recently changed in the last, couple, 2, 3 years. You start to have these tools coming out of AI and your ability to ask questions and get a fairly quick response generated. And I noticed that also, of course, at the early days, the quality still, I could see the direction it was going. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if you had I wouldn't call it a single source of truth, but at least a single place that could easily be found on when you do a search. And Google outside of China is like 95% of the world's primary search engine, right? It dominates everything. YouTube, of course, and also TikTok as well. But it all comes back to, where do you get this information from? So you got research papers, you've got experts, you've got all the information is out there, but it's extremely difficult to find. So of course, the sweet landing spot for a search was be page one of Google, right? But when you traditionally look for information, you just couldn't find it. You have to flip through, and you weren't quite getting what you need. So I decided to create the sustainability directory to kind of house the vast and complex domain of sustainability under one roof. And there's a lot of information out there, but I wanted to do it in a smart way, as a resource that anybody could use. It's open to everybody. You just go there. And I started also discovering that, well, how do we search for information? We search through, questions. We ask questions. AI is very good at this now, but AI is also lazy. And like humans, we want to produce the quick answer, the sort of the veneer answer to a query, and it can be so much better. So we started to really work on building the prompt that you need to force Gemini or Chatty or whatever to find that quality that you're looking for, the diamonds in the rough, if you will, that allow you to get a comprehensive, authoritative response to that query. So we built the directory as a sort of call it a glossary, if you will. But as the tools became ever more powerful and the quality just parabolic. You started to realize, like, well, what if we answered or asked and answered as many of the possible questions that you could ask on sustainability, huge domain as it is, and answer it in a very, very comprehensive, authoritative way, structured so that the user gets what they need quickly. Because nowadays people don't want, I could read a 500-page book and I'll lock myself in the room and I'll just chew through that. But people want information that is actually valuable and in short, bite-sized portions. But also for AI, when it does want to give you, if you ask that question and get an answer, AI doesn't want to have to generate it. It uses energy. But if you have an answer that's already comprehensive and referenced with authoritative resources, it's going to default to that. So we're at now 200,000 web pages of just questions and answers. It's huge and keeps growing because the way we've built our algorithm is it runs, fairly automated, that it just, once you produce an answer to that particular question, it generates another 3 questions and it just keeps going, and you go deeper, deeper, and you get into some very obscure, very specific questions, but the quality of the responses, it's incredible. But we also realized, and this was fairly recently, that the directory's like the mothership. It's full of information, but we also realized that it, just because of the sheer volume, it's not slowing down. It's just getting a little harder to access. So we've built out another 8 sites to go very specific in fashion, lifestyle, pollution, energy, ESG. So that when you do look for something, it's actually very, very well categorized. It's call them subsites, if you will. Our infrastructure is amazing on what we've built, but again, the domain is so big, so we wanted to then make it even easier for users, and that's an open source. And we've got writers coming in who want to also publish their thought pieces. We're forming partnerships with Future Fit, for example. We support them, and they support us to just get the benchmark that they're using more popular, more in the domain, so people become more aware of it. But yeah, it's not a passion project for sure. It started off as just something quite small, but the capabilities just allowed us to get something that's, I hope, will be useful, valuable, and authoritative for users around the world to be able to access and get what they need quickly in terms of information. Of course, we're going to be developing a learning tool that you can develop your own bespoke learning journey on a particular topic that happens in real time. Because now we can do that, and that's hopefully going to be at the end of Q1 that we'll have at least the prototype. So lots of, and it's super exciting. I feel like a kid because it's not just like finally I got what I wanted, but it's also the possibilities of what we can do now with the tools is just amazing. The volume of data that we can access, analyze, and interpret, and also to produce something that makes sense of something very, very complex is incredible, and I think really helps get my head around this space. It's just massive. I will never become an expert in this topic because it's just too big to become an expert. But I think it gets me excited of what you can uncover and the connections that you can make that you didn't really see before.
Fantastic. And it's really an interesting proposition to have a sort of closer repository of knowledge, a trove of knowledge of high quality that is sometimes also that is lacking, and it can help also businesses, people, laymen, and people they want to also even just get into the field to have a kickstart. And if you have just mentioned one thing, if you can tell us in a nutshell, what do you want to do in the next maybe 1 or 2 years? Where do you want to take the director? You mentioned the future fit, you mentioned others. Which is the path that you are envisaging?
Well, I think, there's 2 approaches that, when we set out on this journey, my partner and I, we thought, okay, well, there's 2 things you can do. You can build a website that takes, a couple hours, you get a beautiful website, blah, blah, blah. But then you got to go out and knock on doors. And this phase that we've done for the last year and a half has really been the foundation building. And that's the magnet where, users come come to us. They're looking for something out there. They find something specific, they get their answer, they can come to the website and even go deeper and explore around. But at the moment, it's really just it's a repository. It's like a library, if you will. Okay. And I love libraries. But the next phase is, now that we've got this, still growing repository of information, for example, nowadays you can just get online and buy a course, for example, right? You can go to Udemy, you can go to Coursera and all the goes, and you can pay whatever, sums of money to get a course, and you can sit there for 8 hours and watch this. But I've discovered, is a lot of that information is just simply out of date. Even some of the most cutting edge programs out there, the information is just gets out of date very, very quickly. It's dated, and I don't think people really have the, I wouldn't say have the time, or I would probably say prioritize the time to sit down and digest 8 hours or even 4 hours of a course. And there's great courses out there, don't get me wrong, but I have always approached learning as, you go this way, tangents, your interests just take you into 1,000 different directions. And I think that when people want to learn something, they want to enter a topic at the level of understanding where they currently are. Now, you could be a subject matter expert up here, or you can be a novice coming in and you're just interested about composting. Let's just pick a topic, right? So what we're developing right now is a means for individuals to actually engage on the topic in sustainability, but the same ecosystem can pivot to other areas to enter into that topic, engage it, and have a course created for you in seconds that allows you that answers your question, builds a learning guide for you, and then you take your learning in the direction that you want it to go. So you might start in at novice, and through your question and answer end up having a fairly intermediate or even fairly high level of understanding on that one particular thing. But then your interests take you this direction, or it takes you that direction. And then you start to discover carbon capture, storage, and carbon capture and utilization and storage technology. Like, hey, that's interesting. And then you go into that areas, and you could literally spend hours and hours and hours, but you want to do this because you're curious. And this is how I approached reading. I mean, if my library at home here in Shanghai is massive, and it's just an eclectic collection of topics from, ancient Greek, Roman history, all the way to salt, to how to pickle, cabbage effectively. And that's how I approach it. And I just pinball from themes. Maybe that's just how my mind works, but I think it's a future of learning. I'm not sure if it's the future of learning, but I see its applications in university, high schools. If you got a typical class of 20 people, you might have one or two people that sit right at the top and they're bored in class, and you have maybe two or three at the rock bottom. They haven't had the opportunities. They don't understand the topic. The teacher can't give them extra time. They're frustrated. They just switch off. And then you have this cohort in between that has varying degrees of understanding. And I see not necessarily our tool, but the future of learning being something where it supports the teacher and engages the students to engage on that topic where they currently are. And the teacher's role starts to, more supportive, and can focus on, underachievers for whatever reason they're underachieving. They'll get the attention, but people can leave that topic with a much better understanding than if they just sat in a class listening to a lecturer. I don't mind sitting in the class listening to a lecturer, but most people nowadays, they don't even show up for lectures. So I think there's a lot happening in the education space, and that's one area that we're targeting, at least in sustainability.
I can totally agree with you. Sometimes you stay in a room for 2, 3 hours, and then after you get out of the room, the blackboard, your internal blackboard is completely blank. So you say,
Exactly.
"Wow."
Yeah.
So,
In one ear, out the other.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you touch the curiosity points, if you manage to get the person, the attention spans higher, and spark his curiosity, that is where you can really anchor the learning.
Exactly. And you could do it on your phone in the subway. You could sit down on a laptop. I mean, half of people now access the internet only on their phones. So it has to be designed, it's designed for that user. But then, you go from that to we want to build a tool that allows you to build a sustainable business of your dreams, from scratch. So you might be a young, person, you're sitting in an office, you dream of being an entrepreneur, but you also want to do business the right way. And we're developing a tool that also has obviously educational applications for it, but allows you to build your brand, build your business, but also to address what is material to that business. If you're in the fashion industry, for example, you want to build your cool fashion brand, that's great. We'll even produce your logo and marketing material, the whole package for you, as you work through it. But the key thing here is, doing the right thing being a truly sustainable business is not easy. It is hard. But I think what we want to do is to be able to give visibility of where you need to focus your efforts in whatever business you're building. You're going to have, a heat map, if you will, for your business that you need to pay particular attention to. Some of the things you can do are fairly obvious that you may not have thought of, but then you actually can go, oh yeah, I can, how do we handle dispute resolution in our future, imaginary company? If an employee has a problem, how do we address this? Is it a sustainability issue? Yes, it is. When we look at employers and employees, retribution, whistleblower, all that kind of stuff is you need to have something in place that protects people when they have a dispute in your organization. Nobody thinks about this, and especially a small entrepreneur. So we want this tool to be playful, get people engaged, to be entrepreneurial. I think we need entrepreneurs more than ever, going forward. We need small local businesses that are doing the right thing. And I think we can have a cool and fun way to actually get you on that journey, but also get you started on the right foot and also be a sustainable business, but to appreciate exactly where it's going to be quite difficult for you. And I think that visibility is valuable, and you learn a lot in the process of building your imaginary company, which then hopefully can transition into the real thing.
That's fantastic. So from, let's say, a repository, a library, which is the way we are now, a quality library now becoming a learning instrument for people, and then also a tool, let's say, to give you the nuts and bolts to create your business, building upon that glossary, that repository. That is a fantastic.
That's just a couple of things that we're developing right now. But I know when I think about it, there's probably a dozen other areas that we're doing. But of course, time being the most precious resource I have, you have to, focus on your priorities and just, work through this as you build it up. But the foundation is the most important. You can't build a house without a solid foundation. So that's been the bulk of it. And now that that's largely completed, now we move into the next phase. And that's where we start to look at the opportunities for the users to stay on the site, to engage the content more deeply, to learn, to develop something. And of course, the applications moving into, what I would call almost more advisory service level scope becomes much easier. And of course, looking at things like energy, energy cost of energy, its impact on taxation and all. There's this, my head just, there's too many things. It's a work in progress, I guess is what I'm trying to say. There's no list of these are the services. It's kind of, it evolves and you start to realize that would be cool. Let's now trial it out. Yeah, because it is an iterative process. You don't really know at the end of the day until you iterate it, put it in front of the user, and they say, yes, that's what we need. Then you can focus on developing out even further.
And this is also a practical way, as you said, fast after discussing, in the China project, you discuss with a lot of innovators, startups, then you are translating that in your own journey, becoming like a founder and iterating, moving here and trying to get to the results. So
yeah, it's fun. That's how I do it anyways. This is not necessarily advisable for other people, but that's how I approach it. It's working out so far.
fantastic. And I'm sure we will try to see again, maybe touch base in some time to see where you have taken the directory, and also to understand a bit more, maybe and to understand more also your journey with innovators and people and CEO and sustainability in China. So As a last question, we usually ask our guests, which is your message you want to leave? And you have ever given a lot of them, but one message you want to leave to our audience?
I think if one message, for those interested in pursuing sustainability, whether you're, an enthusiast, you label yourself an enthusiast of ESG, of DEI, whatever, that enthusiasm is critical if you want to start to move towards implementing. And I think it's easy to say, go out and study sustainability. And I think, of course, that helps, that base of knowledge. But I think for those listeners out there who are in jobs, in roles in a company, they love what they're doing, keep doing it. If you're a product developer, keep being a product developer. But understand that, how you approach that product development can be done quite differently. And that's where you start to, sustainability touches pretty much every role in a company, even though people aren't aware of it. Like HR might say, well, how does sustainability, what does it mean to us, if you're in HR? But if you're, say, a product developer, that is, you just keep doing what you're doing. Be a great product developer, but realize also that when you start to put on the lens of water use, of end user use, you start to see energy and carbon footprinting of that product development process, and you start bringing that into your development process, it'll change radically how you approach that product development in a much, much better, more effective way. Because a lot of people won't consider things like, what's the carbon footprint of this product, and where does concern for that come? It comes right at the design stage of redesign. Of course, it brings us into circular economy principles, etc. But when you start from the basis of how much carbon emissions will this product require to generate, and its use perhaps, then it just your job becomes sustainability right there. So you might be a product developer, never thought really about sustainability. You care about it, but when you start to see your role through a different pair of glasses, and those glasses being from a sustainability perspective, it just changes everything in for the better. Okay, you realize it's not easy, but when you start from that different perspective, it changes how you design something. And I could spend another 3 hours just talking about cases of how companies at the very highest level, they say, we never thought about that before, and all of a sudden they're saving money, they're meeting their client needs, because they have their targets for carbon and energy reductions as well. All of a sudden, sustainability isn't seen as something that it's an expense, it's a pain in the butt, blah, blah, blah. It's actually fundamental now to the survival of our business for the long term, and it's making us money. It's making us think differently. That's exciting. So I think, keep doing what you're doing, but then put on those spectacles of, see what you do through a different lens, and it opens up huge possibilities to really make improvements on how you make a product, how you market a product, how you communicate the product, how you take that product back, how you deal with your end users. You're going to see it differently, and it's in a much more exciting way. Your job will just become like 2.0. You're going to see your job totally different, and I think it's quite exciting.
Fantastic, Lorne. It's really something that helps people, changing the mind and understanding the bigger picture. So thank you so much for this wonderful episode. It's been an honor and pleasure to have you. And sure, we will see you also maybe for another one to see where the path has taken you.
I hope so.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, Samuel. Thank you very much.
Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.